Hello, Canada. Ontario, are you with us, Dr. Mathur?
Yes, I hope I am.
Hello, good afternoon to you from Leicester in the UK. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I would say good morning, but I know it's afternoon for you. It's such a pleasure to be here at such a unique event. I'm a mother of 3 teenage girls, so we're all about empowerment, particularly female empowerment in this house. And I'm going to speak with you about advocacy. It's not something I really think about. I think it's just sort of a state of being in some ways, or something that you just do. But I looked it up just to see what the definition was. And advocacy, by definition, is an activity by an individual or group that aims to influence decisions within political, economic, and social systems and institutions. In the case of patient advocacy, these aims would be directed towards patient-centric goals. Well, I mean, that's the official definition, but what are we really talking about? We're really talking about making a difference. Now, sometimes this difference is for ourselves in self-advocacy, when we have to do that for making sure we get the best of our care possible. And at other times, it's to talk about advocacy, making a change in the wider Parkinson's community, which is really what I want to talk to you about today. So, do I think of myself as an advocate? Well, I hope I do, because I'm talking to you about it today. But it's been about 21 years since my diagnosis. And so I think at this point, I do spend a lot of my time doing patient advocacy. It's a way that I sort of serve the Parkinson's community. It's my passion. But it wasn't always this way. I don't think it happens automatically. It takes some time to shift our focus from our own diagnosis and our own life experience to one of advocacy. And how does this shift occur? Well, my friend and someone I looked up to a great deal, Tom Isaacs, founder of Cure Parkinson's Trust, described it in this way. He described the psychological journey that a person takes from the point of diagnosis to the point of advocacy. And he summarized it in the advocacy pyramid. Now I'm going to have to try and share this with you. Hopefully that comes through. Not the best at this stuff. Can you see that? It's probably not the best resolution, but hopefully you can see it. So let's start at the bottom, diagnosis. We all have our own stories, and these stories are varied, and we all know our own stories very well. But I'll tell you a bit about mine. My diagnosis came at the age of 27. I was expecting my first child and just finishing my residency in family practice. So not the most convenient time, I must say. I basically developed a tremor in my right pinky finger, and when it became consistent enough that I couldn't ignore it any longer, I went to the neurologist in my clinic that I had just joined, a friend of mine actually. And perhaps, unlike a lot of you, because I've heard stories of delayed diagnosis, mine came pretty quickly. He put me through a ream of physical tests and then leaned across the desk and said, "I think you have young onset Parkinson's disease." And that's when the friendship ended, because of course I didn't want to hear anything about young onset Parkinson's disease. But I did accept his offer for a second opinion and went to see probably the foremost movement disorder specialist in Canada. And unfortunately, he confirmed it. So there was no denying it any longer. I had to deal with this unwelcome diagnosis, this unexpected trajectory that my life had taken. The usual reaction I had was probably one that you all have had, a reaction to receiving a diagnosis of a neurodegenerative, currently incurable illness is what the next part of this journey shows. And I don't know if I can, sorry. Can you see that? No. Well, the next part of the pyramid is what we call the stage of shock, anger, denial. And this is probably the most psychologically stressful part of this journey. In this part of this journey, we tend to build barriers. We have not truly accepted our diagnosis. We're of the belief that nobody could possibly understand what we're going through. I was stuck at this stage for a very long time. I spent probably the better part of the decade of the beginning of my illness spent in this stage. I was in complete denial, anger, secrecy, and fear. I busied myself with busyness, trying to immerse myself in house and home and family and work, anything that I could do just to take my mind off of dealing with this diagnosis. And how long does this stage last? Well, for me, as I mentioned, it took a number of years. For others, they may adapt more quickly, and for others, they tend to linger even longer. But I think it is possible with a great deal of introspection and hard work and emotional support that we can move on to the next stage of the pyramid. The next stage of the pyramid, which I don't know if I'm going to be able to get up again. Let me see if I'm able to do that. Oh, well, the next stage is basically acceptance. Now, when I say acceptance, I'm talking about emotional acceptance, not intellectual acceptance, because that is something that came very easily to me, considering I had a medical background and was able to understand my disease. But actually, let me take a step back. The next step, actually, after the stage of denial and fear and anxiety, is one of communication. And communication is a stage where basically we start to disclose our diagnosis to those around us. It took me a very long time to do this. I hid my diagnosis for a very long time. And that was because from an occupational standpoint, I didn't want anyone to feel that I was incapable of making medical diagnoses, that my medical knowledge was somehow flawed or my decisions were not made in an appropriate way. I was concerned about the reaction of others. When it came to family and friends, I simply didn't want a pity party. A pity party was not something I was fond of. I didn't want people to say, poor you, or they're there. I think that may be like a lot of us. But once I began to communicate to people in my life, and that was mainly because I couldn't hide my symptoms any longer, my disease had progressed too far, I felt a burden lifted, and one that I didn't even realize had really existed. In this stage, we begin to recognize that the reason we feel that no one understands how we feel is because we haven't communicated to them our experience. At this point in our journey, we begin to understand that really a burden shared is a problem halved. And that's what I began to understand. This then allows you to move to that next stage, which I had mentioned before, which is acceptance. And this is really a key stage in your journey. It's a lesson, unfortunately, that it took me a long time to learn. It didn't come easy for me. As I mentioned before, the beginning few years of my diagnosis were really spent not just in physical turmoil as my body was starting to change, but emotional turmoil as well, with no regard of how inconvenient it was for me to have, and how young I was. The symptoms continued to develop. My disease continued to develop. And I became very fearful of what the future held. There was no sort of escaping this relentless progress. But eventually I came to a crossroad. And I'm sure, again, most of you can understand. I looked in the mirror and I became a person I really wasn't happy with. I had many blessings in my life at that point, and there was really no reason for me to feel as perpetually pessimistic as I was feeling. I didn't feel joy anymore. I wasn't happy anymore. I wasn't laughing anymore with my children. And I didn't like it. It's not the person I wanted to become. So after a great deal of introspection, taking a look at the state of my health, I really began to understand emotionally that my disease wasn't going to change anytime soon. The only thing I had control over was how I was going to face the challenges that the disease brings. And that's when I began to emotionally accept my diagnosis. Now, when I say acceptance, please understand, I don't mean complacency. I don't mean lie down, you've got the disease, just roll over. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the type of acceptance that allows you to move forward, that allows you to move beyond your diagnosis, that allows you to take control of your future. And this is the type of acceptance that will fuel your desire to educate yourself, that will allow you to build your support team, that will allow you to become an active participant in your diagnosis and in your management. Because knowledge, like acceptance, is power when it comes to Parkinson's disease. And once you're able to accept this disease for yourself, you can then turn your focus outwards towards other than your Parkinson's community. This is the state of engagement and participation, and your outlook becomes wider than yourself. It just doesn't become a personal experience. You start to engage with others, listen to other stories, begin to understand that by sharing your own experience, you can help others through theirs. You become more engaged in the community. Perhaps that means joining a support group, or maybe learning about a particular aspect of Parkinson's disease management, such as clinical trials. However you choose to participate, as my friend Tom said so aptly, you go from being needy to being needed. And that's the stage in advocacy. You begin to devote most of your time, or much of your time, to the business of Parkinson's. It becomes your focus and your passion. Your goals are to help others through this experience. Your goal is to help the community find better treatments and a cure. This time of advocacy is a time of influence, where your input can actually impact patient outcomes and patient policies. Your insight, your passion, your focus, your empathy, your participation can all lead to tangible results. And why are women in particular needed in the field of advocacy? Because we need to make changes for ourselves. We need to make changes in the system for ourselves. And why is that? Well, although we do share some, and in fact, many similarities with our male counterparts, there are some significant differences in our experience of this disease and its management. For example, although we tend to develop Parkinson's less often than our male counterparts, we do experience more non-motor symptoms when we do develop symptoms. Those are cognitive, autonomic, psychological, sleep-related. In this effect, we may experience depression or sadness more, anxiety or nervousness more. And these non-motor symptoms, we know, can really impact quality of life. That's a known fact for everybody, but particularly for women as well. And biologically, we're different. We have these hormonal fluctuations that we all have to deal with, unfortunately, when it comes to menstruation or pregnancy. And we hear from other women that our symptoms tend to vary with these hormonal changes as well. We're also more likely to have osteoporosis or other comorbidities. Osteoporosis is a significant problem, considering when coupled with the falls that we tend to have with Parkinson's disease later in the disease, there can be more serious consequences such as fractures. And when it comes to treatment, women are more prone to experiencing medication-induced dyskinesias, those symptoms which I'm actually experiencing right now a little bit of, and motor fluctuations. And even though we have better outcomes with DBS, deep brain stimulation, our quality of life seems to improve more so than our male counterparts. We tend to undergo this procedure less often. Why is that? And we tend to see specialists for our disease, to manage our disease, less often than men. Why is that? There are not only biological issues, but there are cultural and gender issues that mean that our life experience of Parkinson's disease is very different. And we require different community services and programs and support. And these programs need to be designed to address these unique issues. Given all the differences, given all these issues that we need answers to, women and our specific issues are really underrepresented in the research landscape. Research really must start to include topics of relevance to us. And actually, when they include topics of relevance to us, it increases our understanding of the disease in general. We need to examine the effect of biological sex and hormones on Parkinson's risk, progression, and response to treatments in order to better our own treatments and quality of life, as well as, again, increasing understanding of the disease in general. And we need to advocate to minimize disparities with women with Parkinson's disease in our experience compared to our male counterparts. We need to make sure that the programs in our communities and the resources available to women address our unique needs. We need more advocates. We need all of you to continue your work in this area and maybe to be inspired to take on something new. We all, in essence, have the potential to become advocates. And what that will look like will really vary from person to person. Now, for some, this means becoming a recognizable face in the community, taking on more visible roles, being asked to speak at events like this, having the privilege to do so. But in my humble opinion, those that advocate in more unseen ways, encouraging policy changes, influencing things like clinical trial participation, fundraising for research and community care, setting up support groups, giving a voice to the voiceless in so many unique ways. Those are truly the advocates whose actions and intentions benefit us all. And to those who bravely pushed ahead and contributed to this search for better treatments and ultimately that elusive cure for this disease, so we don't have to wake up facing the challenges that this disease inevitably brings into our lives. For those amazing individuals, I'm deeply grateful. And I'm also deeply grateful for you to take the time out to listen to me today. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them. Thank you.
We could get a copy of your book. Could you tell us where we could get a copy of your book?
Hi, Heather.
Hi. Thank you.
I've written a couple of books for children because I think that children really need to understand this disease when they see their loved one going through it. I think that knowledge is power when it comes to children as well. I think that they often fear what they don't know. And when they know that something's wrong, but it's not discussed with them, I think that's a detriment to them. So I wrote a couple of books. One is My Grandpa's Shaky Hands, and that is about a little boy who loves his grandpa despite the shaky hands, and they go on a bit of an adventure together. That's more for preschool kids. The other one is Shaky Hands, A Kid's Guide to Parkinson's Disease, and that's more for older kids. And we talk about everything. We talk about symptoms, we talk about treatments, we talk about what children can do to help out, because I think it's really important to empower children to make a difference. And both of those books, proceeds who go straight to clinical research, are available on Amazon, and they're available in the UK Amazon as well as Canada and the US.
Thank you very much as well for joining us. I'm well aware it's very early over where you are. You're up at the crack of dawn, I gather. And we are privileged that you took part, Dr. Mathur. And so that's it, I think. Thank you very much.
Thank you.